Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Last Wrestling Podcast, because if I have a wrestling podcast, everybody else in the world does too, and the concept is officially dead. Well, last night nearly drove me to tears, so let's do it again, because I hate myself. It is night 2 of Wrestlemania Cutlass. There was a pre-show where Natalya lost to a blonde woman, and the announcers saw the Romero special and didn't even think to mention Jushin Thunder Liger, because they're plebeians. Other than that, nothing happened. Rita Repulsa has once again escaped from the dumpster. Skip. We get an identical introduction to last night, and then the Gronk was there. Skip. Our first actual wrestling match of the evening is for the NXT Women's Championship, main roster versus good roster. It's Charlotte challenging for the NXT Women's Championship against Rhea Ripley. And this is supposed to be this big historical moment, the first time an NXT title is, I believe, defended on the main roster at all on a pay-per-view, but certainly the first time on WrestleMania. And it's opening the curtain, it's opening the show, jerking the curtain, whatever, on night 2. This is going to be another one of those ones that could have really benefited from an actual audience, isn't it? That was really good, except for the fact the wrong person won. Okay, yeah, I was right. This would have benefited so much more from a hot crowd getting into it. In fact, if we'd had a crowd, this would have been justified as the first match of the main show because people would be fresh. They would, at least hypothetically, have gotten a decent night's sleep. But it was a really good match. It was back and forth. Charlotte had a good strategy targeting the knee of Rhea Ripley that apparently had been injured earlier on a show I didn't watch. But I mean, that's fine. That's my fault, not theirs. So I like callbacks. I like that. Charlotte talking a lot though. And one of the things that I've noticed with some of the less experienced wrestlers, and it's important to point out, Charlotte is still relatively inexperienced compared to, say, a Daniel Bryan or a Drew Gulak or a Cesaro. She does not have experience in front of anything less than an NXT crowd, as far as I'm aware. So she was talking like this! I was the SmackDown champion! I was the Raw champion! What is this? This is a 2-time women's champion in NXT? This is pathetic! Get off of me! Don't touch me! Lady, the person you're talking to is like 6 inches away from you. Probably closer than she ought to be right now. You don't need to enunciate to the gods here. There are no gods. There's nobody there. Trust the microphone to pick you up. Speak like a normal person. Speak loudly, that's fine. You don't have to shout. Unfortunately, from a narrative standpoint, turns out Charlotte was right. Rhea Ripley is not the next big thing. Rhea Ripley is a flash in the pan, and Rhea Ripley ain't as good as Charlotte, and therefore the opportunity to make a new star has been completely and utterly blown. Now that said, if the goal here was to bring Charlotte to NXT to sort of bolster the star power of the Wednesday night show up against AEW, then that was, I guess, a good decision. One last thing that really pissed me off here, and this is my fault for not having my tune out the announcers senses fully in sync yet for this show. Very early in the match, I think actually during the entrances, it was mentioned by one of the commentators that Rhea Ripley was coming into this with nothing to lose. She was the champion, you twit! She had something to lose, that big, shiny gold belt, the whole freaking point! Ugh. And my heart rate just spiked, according to my little Fitbit tracker here. Fun! This show is going to hurt me in the health department. Up next, in a special Why on Earth Is This Happening match, we have the almighty Bobby Lashley. And, okay, I do have a question on almighty Bobby Lashley. Are they actually calling him a god? Are they referring to his physique? Are they making a My Hero Academia joke with that name, almighty, big muscular guy? Or is he the Tick? I am the Tick, and I am mighty. That's the voice in my head that just immediately goes to the Tick, but probably not. They just probably thought it sounded like a cool name. Before we get into the actual match, credit where due to Aleister Black coming out looking like the zombie super shredder. This is good. We can't do the WrestleMania entrances this year for obvious reasons, so yeah, let's kick it up a notch with the ring gear. Very good. I've made a few jokes about remembering why I don't like to watch WWE. This is one of the real serious reasons. The way they portray women. Women's evolution, women's revolution, blah, blah, blah. Ignore that for the moment. One of the longest running storylines in WWE, most common tropes that they go to, is women ruin everything. If you are involved with a woman, you are a fool. And once again, bitches be crazy, Lana ruins the match for Bobby Lashley by telling him, while he's got his opponent up for the Dominator, which is his actual finishing move, she tells him, no, go for a spear now. And Bobby Lashley, being a cuck, I guess, does so, however, with Lana blatantly telegraphing the move, televising. The revolution will not be televised. With Lana telegraphing the move, Lashley walks right into the Black Mass 1, 2, 3 end of match, and this annoys me. Up next, we get an interview with Bayley and Sasha Banks. Bayley is not a good heel. At least nowhere near as good as she is a babyface. And Sasha may or may not betray her, and apparently this story has been going on for about 65 years. And yeah, Bayley, they had to work hard to fuck up Bayley. Then more Gronk happened because he wants to be 24/7 champion because he's kind of stupid. Go away. Getting back to the point that in WWE, association with a woman is the stupidest thing you can possibly do as a man, the Krakentron tells us it's time for Otis versus Dolph Ziggler. And this is where I think the longer form WrestleMania, the two-night thing, is actually good because we get to see these sort of mid-card or lower singles feuds actually get matches. Am I still bitter over the fact that we never got Goldust versus Stardust at WrestleMania? Or the fact that we never got The Miz versus Mizdow at WrestleMania? Yes, I am. Thanks for asking. 2 seconds roughly into the freaking entrances, and shut up, JBL! You Trump-sucking son of a bitch! First, okay, Michael Cole brings up the, can you believe what this despicable excuse for a human being named Dolph Ziggler did? And the first thing JBL goes to is, oh, it's fake news. Who sets up a hidden camera? That's the real crime. You son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. Did you not hear Rita Repulsa tell us that this is supposed to be our diversion? And you bring this Fox News, fake news, faux news bullshit into this. Fuck you. I'm not the channel that does It's John O'Clock, motherfucker, but it's John O'Clock, motherfucker. I hate this. And I'll admit, after about the second or third time JBL mentioned CGI, I just skipped most of this match and went to the inevitable Mandy Rose run-in, where she managed to slap Sonya Deville, punch Ziggler in the balls, and help Otis get the win. They are now together. She realizes that she was a bit of a bitch, that he is a nice guy, that they are apparently now together. So I'm still waiting for WWE to screw this up, but it looks like a happy ending if you don't mind that there were 2 nut shots in the match and the good guy took advantage of... You know what? I'm just going to take what I can get. This is fine. Up next, we have reached match graphic territory! Yay! I'm starting to think no match graphic is the new pre-show. And this is one of the matches tonight that I was really looking forward to. I am really looking forward to. While the Randy Orton segments on Raw have been absolute garbage for the most part, aside from somehow putting Matt Hardy over in the attempt to job him out, they managed to really invoke a great emotional reaction from Edge. And Edge has been for a while one of the better actors in WWE. And that's going to serve him really well tonight. And the last man standing stipulation gives them some options to get out of this bare bones performance center set. But the time for great promos from Edge and horrible, long, overdrawn, 20 minutes longer than they needed to be promos from Randy Orton is over. Last man standing match. I'm genuinely excited about this. That was absolutely amazing, but I have to say, before we continue and we talk about the match, Spider Edge, does whatever a Spider Edge does. Can he swing from a web? No, he can't, 'cause he's an edge. Look out, he's falling from a great height. Have you noticed that I'm starting to lose my mind yet? 'Cause I am. Okay. Walk and brawl matches, and that's what this was. It was a massive walk and brawl. Walk and brawl matches are boring, especially when you add in the sort of the hardcore element of build to a spot, walk a bit, build to a spot, walk a bit, build to a spot, walk a bit, build to the biggest spot, end of match. That is not interesting to watch, especially if you're not particularly interested in seeing people hurt themselves for real. But they made this work. 3 things made this match work. 1, Edge is a phenomenal actor. Right from the get-go, he was emoting, he was telling the story that this isn't a wrestling match, that this is him wanting to get his hands on the man who put his hands on his wife. This is wanting to harm the man who spoke ill of his children, who threatened, quite frankly, his children. There was no posing on the stage. There was no, leaning into the whole rated R superstar shtick. This was all business Edge from the beginning. 2, the fact that we basically just got a guided tour of the Performance Center, a place that wrestling fans really haven't seen a lot of, and I think for good reason. The same reason it's good that we haven't gotten really much of a guided tour of the New Japan Dojo. But we got to see a lot of the offices, a lot of the gym, a lot of the backstage area, and it really was interesting. It was visually interesting in a way these kind of matches, especially when you're just brawling through the crowd, usually aren't. So that was good. And lastly, there was a reason for most of this. At least one spot where there were a bunch of ladders that were just sitting in the hallway for no apparent reason, and one of the announcers mentioned, yeah, that's because we had a ladder match last night in pre-tape quotation marks, and that's why we have ladders just sort of sitting around out here, because we just had a ladder match. I buy that. I believe that. That makes freaking sense. It's like the old shtick of, okay, I get why there's a fire extinguisher under the ring. I get why there's maybe a backup announce table or, some extra chairs that we didn't sell. But why is there a kendo stick? Why is there a sledgehammer? Why is there a canoe? This match didn't have that problem. Pretty much everything made sense under the idea that it's the Performance Center. It's a giant gym and office building and warehouse and set design, prop building, workshop thingy. There's probably a better name for that. It worked. It shouldn't have worked, but it worked. Last thing before I switch pictures, who the hell has a giant metal table in your office? I mean, I get you need to have meetings, but why is it a big slab of metal? And who the hell puts an American Gladiators obstacle course climbing net above your office table? Who built this joint? I actually do want to see now a full guided tour of the place. Okay, in the end, Edge able to outlast Randy Orton, and the final move being a concerto on top of a trailer truck. And look at this face. Look at the emotion in his eyes, in his mouth, in his face. He's older. He's visibly aged, but Edge is so unbelievably good at this. I hope he has a long third or fourth or whatever final chapter of his career, because WWE needs people who can actually convey emotion, and this set of shows without a crowd has proven that for the most part they don't have that. So Edge is an unbelievably valuable resource right now, and I hope he has a fantastic remainder of his career. Also, David Arquette, Gronk, is 24/7 champion. This belt is dead. Up next, a match that's been rebooked at least 3 times that I'm aware of for the Raw Tag Team Silver Medals. It's the Street Profits defending against a team that literally didn't exist a week and a half ago. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that the pants come off at Wrestlemania is a sentence that was uttered in the English language. Truly, these are the end times. As for the actual match, a whole bunch of people screamed about how it was WrestleMania, in case you'd forgotten from the extremely subtle signage. And then Bianca Belair showed up, and Bianca Belair is now semi-officially, I'm going to assume officially, associated with the Tag Team Champions. And you know why these 3 were put together. You know. I'm not going to say it, but you know. Though, to be fair, I do like this idea of the trio of loudmouths, which it could work. I just hope Bianca Belair doesn't get lost in the shuffle with the Street Profits. But this is an act on Raw that Paul Heyman apparently really likes, so this is a good thing for her, I guess. Also, the Street Profits retain because, of course they do. They're not going to switch the title to the team that didn't exist last week and won't exist next week. Titus O'Neil is now hosting the show. This is a definite upgrade. Why wasn't he doing this in the first place? And now it's time for the Fatal 5-Way match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Bayley defending against every person they could find who qualifies to compete in the women's division. And as much as I hate to say this, I think we're kind of in a holding pattern waiting for the Firefly Funhouse match, which I'm certain now is going to be going on last. Because, well, the on-site fight scene match saved last night, probably saved tonight as well. I know I'm being really negative on this, but so much of this is just either boring or sad. This is another match that really, really, really needed a crowd, because this was hard to get into. It was so quiet to the point that when they would do the replay, we'd see the instant replay, even though the announcers were talking over it, you could actually hear the announcers speaking on the replay. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that correctly, but we'd hear the audio on the instant replay. We'd hear the audio from the original feed, and you could hear Cole and JBL yelling into the microphones at the commentation station because it was so effing quiet. I feel sorry for everybody involved, because this was not a bad match. And I love that they finally did an elimination match. That's what I've always hated about Triple Threat, Fatal 4-Way, Fatal 5-Way, 6-Pack Challenge, whatever the heck they call it. This whole one fall to a finish, the champion doesn't have to be pinned to lose their title. Well, this time they did. But, of course, that didn't actually happen because we've decided we don't need to actually progress the storyline tonight. And while I'd normally be ranting about that and how this has been dragged on for so long with Bayley and Sasha, hell, the Bayley-Sasha will they, won't they betray each other, that was a plot line the last WWE pay-per-view I reviewed on this show 2 freaking years ago. But you know what? Fine. This was a time filler on a show that probably shouldn't be happening, so I'm gonna give them a little bit of a break. I'm in a generous mood because we finally get to the Firefly Funhouse match. I have no freaking clue what a Firefly Funhouse match is, but I hope they let Bray Wyatt go to absolute town on this. Everything I've read, watched, heard about The Fiend, and I do love the Fiend gimmick, is that this whole mythology has been Bray's love child. So I'm hoping that WWE got the hell out of his way and we're going to get to see something awesome in the next few minutes. Wish me luck. When I was a child, one of my favorite cartoons was the X-Men, because they had such a great variety of characters and powers and ideas and costumes and themes and all sorts of and serial storytelling that fascinated me at the time. But my favorite character was Professor Charles Xavier, because he was the weakest of the X-Men physically. He couldn't walk, he was confined to a wheelchair. And yet he was the most powerful of all of the X-Men. The most powerful character on the show, one could argue, because of his mind. There was one episode where Xavier battled one of the enemies. It was either Juggernaut or the Shadow King, I don't entirely remember, in the battlefield of the mind. And it was this crazy psychedelic image fest where we saw just how powerful Xavier was on his battlefield. Today we've seen just how powerful Bray Wyatt is on his battlefield. I'm not going to attempt to recap that, because what we just saw in the Firefly Funhouse was, and beyond the Firefly Funhouse more importantly, was some of the best wrestling storytelling I've seen outside of Chikara, and certainly the best I've ever seen from WWE, because you had to pay attention. Another of my favorite television shows is Doctor Who, and someone who was involved in making the show responded to criticism. This is in the modern era. I think it was either during the David Tennant era or the Matt Smith era. Responded to criticism that there were too many mystery stories, too many overarching season-long plots that, people couldn't really make sense of. And someone behind the show, it might have been Stephen Moffat, I'm not sure, basically said, well, yes, we do assume that the audience is paying attention. This isn't a show you watch while you're doing your laundry. And this isn't a match that you watch while doing your laundry. They did a good job of recapping and pointing out what exact references they were making, but you had to know a lot about John Cena, Bray Wyatt, and even Vince McMahon in order to get all the references that were made here. I loved it! Again, without going through a scene-by-scene recap, which I'm tempted to do as another video, quite frankly, the main plot of this is that within this realm beyond the Funhouse, Bray Wyatt has full control. At least the entity that we know as Bray Wyatt has full control. And because John Cena is mentally unprepared for the psychic onslaught of the Funhouse, Bray is able to control Cena the way he's able to control everything else. So he's able to force Cena to become the ruthless aggression rookie who nearly gets himself fired, his own greatest failure. He's able to force him to become the Doctor of Thugonomics. He's able to force him to finally turn heel and join the NWO for some reason. And in the end, Cena has no response. Now, I will give John Cena all the credit in the world for holding up his end of this, because he was able to portray both John Cena, the character we know, and John Cena under the control of Bray Wyatt. Cena was another puppet in the Funhouse for 90% of this match, but he was still able to fight back. He was still able to get a few zingers in as the Doctor of Thugonomics. He was able to at least take a swing at Bray Wyatt as Ruthless Aggression. He was able to finally swing that chair as Big Match John. But he was still a puppet on strings for almost everything, and in the end, and what I loved about this, is that for most of this match, it was all Bray Wyatt. But in the end, we see The Fiend. And it is The Fiend who combines elements. I don't think I've ever seen this before. Not only using The Fiend's mandible claw, but grabbing Cena in the mandible claw, pulling him in by the jaw, by the mandible, and turning it into Sister Abigail's kiss. In the end, this was complete domination of Bray Wyatt over John Cena. And in the end, we hear a brilliant, wonderful, exemplary callback to a promo that Cena gave insulting Bray Wyatt, talking about how this WrestleMania match will end the most overhyped, overrated, overprivileged superstar in WWE history. Well, that's exactly what happened, and that superstar was John Cena. Between this and the Boneyard match, I think we can officially declare that the cinematic experiment of WrestleMania Cutlass is an unqualified success. This was the best thing WWE has put out in years, the best thing I would say they put out in decades, possibly the best thing they've ever put out ever. And I may not feel that way in 24 hours or after I've had a decent night's sleep, but god damn, this was good. I pity Drew McIntyre and Brock Lesnar having to follow this. And they couldn't. They couldn't follow that. That was 10 minutes of a shadow of what it could have been and a pathetic excuse for what it should have been. Drew McIntyre, your new WWE champion, and he deserved a hell of a lot better than what I just saw. That was going through the motions, while Drew did a great job, and I think this was actually pretty real, of showing the emotion on his face when the championship belt was handed to him. The rest of that was a paint by numbers. It was the Goldberg match. It was the Goldberg match again. Finish, finish, finish. Oh no, I've got finish, 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 finish. 1, 2, 3, good night. Let's just get the hell out of here and pretend this never happened. Final thoughts. There was a lot of garbage on this show. Both of these shows. But there was some really, really good stuff too. The Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse, unqualified success. A little bit of weirdness in the Boneyard, but I loved the Firefly Funhouse. They need to be in the Fiend business right now. That's WWE's future if they're going to have a future. They need to be in the Fiend business. Taking a look at night 2 on its own, it was mostly awful. Between the Firefly Funhouse and the Last Man Standing match with Edge and Orton, there was enough to sort of drag it back from the abyss of oblivion. But this was not a good show. This was sad, dull, and boring to watch most of the time. And I don't blame any of the wrestlers. They're not trained for this. They are not trained to be stunt actors. They are not trained to be for this kind of television. They're trained to emote to the last row of an audience that isn't there. And it showed, and it sucked for the most part. However, I'm not going to give this show, or Night 1, or WrestleMania 36 as a whole, a letter grade, because I'm not qualified to do that. I don't know how much of the stuff that annoyed me on this show was standard issue WWE nonsense that people have in a Stockholm kind of way gotten used to or have learned to accept. I don't know how much of this was the stress of the current crisis. I don't know how much of this was the fact that they were making this up on the fly. I don't know how much of this was the original plan and how much of this wasn't. I don't know what they were doing, and I don't think they knew what they were doing either. I think this was mostly improvised. The one thing I do know for certain is that it shouldn't have happened. This should have been saved until whenever this is over and we can have our great celebratory return to reality. But it wasn't, and it has to stand on its own merits. So, the final grade for WrestleMania Cutlass is not applicable. There was a bit of good, there was a bit of absolutely brilliant, and there was a whole lot of garbage that I had to force myself to sit through, and frankly, if I wasn't making a video about it, I wouldn't have sat through. So, WrestleMania 36 shouldn't have happened. Part of it I'm glad did, but most of it, send it to the bottom of the sea. Thank you for watching if you still are. This has been incredibly difficult to get out in even a vaguely timely manner. I envy people who have professional editors and studios and all that stuff. Please like, share, subscribe, enable notifications. You know the drill. Thank you for watching. This has been the Last Wrestling Podcast.
Let me in.